The spaceport on Prime was always busy. Ships came and went at all hours. Merchants shouted prices for their goods. Travelers rushed to catch their transports. The air smelled like engine fuel and strange foods from 100 different worlds. It was the kind of place where everyone was in a hurry and nobody paid attention to anyone else. Was 14 years old, and he had been coming to this spaceport with his younger brothers for almost a year now. Was 12, and Little had just turned 10. They were, with blue skin and 4 arms each. Their large dark eyes watched everything around them as they walked through the crowded marketplace. They carried a small bag between them. It held the money they had earned today from selling scrap metal they had collected near the old processing plants. It was not much money. It was never much money, but their mother always smiled when they brought it home. She would tell them they were good boys and that she was proud of them. That made all the hard work feel worth it. The 3 brothers were heading toward the transport station that would take them back to the lower district where they lived. They moved carefully through the crowd, staying close together as their mother had taught them. The spaceport could be dangerous for young ones who were not careful. That was when saw the human. She was standing near a broken cargo lift, surrounded by 6 heavy cases. The cases were made of shiny metal and looked very expensive. The human woman herself looked expensive too. She wore clean clothes in soft colors, and her brown hair was pulled back neatly from her face. She was maybe 40 years old by human standards, though was not very good at guessing human ages. Her name, as they would soon learn, was. Right now looked tired and frustrated. She was trying to lift 2 of her cases at once, but they were clearly too heavy. She set them down and looked around for help. The spaceport workers walked past her without stopping. Other travelers avoided her eyes. Nobody wanted to help the human. Understood why. Everyone in the galaxy knew about humans. They came from Earth, a death world where everything tried to kill everything else. Humans were said to be violent, unpredictable, and dangerous. They could survive injuries that would kill most other species. They ate the flesh of other creatures. They had conquered their brutal planet and then spread out into the stars. Many species feared them. But also remembered what his mother always said. She said that you could not judge a person by what others said about their kind. You had to see them for yourself. You had to look at their actions, not their species. He looked at the human woman again. She did not look violent or dangerous. She looked like someone who needed help. Made a decision. He turned to his brothers and looked up at him with curious eyes. "We should help her," said quietly. His eyes went wide. "She is a human," he whispered. "She is a person with too many bags," replied. "Come on." He walked toward the human woman before his brothers could argue. After a moment he heard their footsteps following him. They were scared, but they trusted him. They always had. Noticed them approaching and tensed up slightly. Saw her hands tighten on the handle of one case. She was nervous too. Maybe humans had heard bad things about, or maybe she just did not expect anyone to approach her. "Excuse me," said in the common galactic language. He tried to make his voice sound friendly and calm. "Do you need help with your bags?" The human woman stared at him for a moment. Then she looked at and standing behind him. Something in her expression softened. "That is very kind of you," she said. Her voice was warm and a little surprised. "Yes, I would appreciate the help very much. The cargo lift broke down and I cannot carry all of these myself." Nodded and picked up 2 of the cases. They were heavier than he expected, but he had 4 arms, which made carrying things easier. Took 2 more cases and managed to carry 1. Picked up the last case herself. "Where are you going?" asked. "The hotel," she said. "It is about 10 minutes from here. Is that too far? I can pay you for your trouble." Shook his head. "No payment needed. We are happy to help." They started walking through the crowded spaceport. People stared at them as they passed. Saw an other species looking shocked that 3 young boys were helping a human. A few of them whispered to each other. Ignored them all. Walked beside him. She moved with the easy confidence of someone who was used to traveling and doing business in many places. But she also kept glancing at the three brothers with something like wonder in her eyes. "What are your names?" she asked. These are my brothers, and it is nice to meet you all. She smiled at them. "Do you live here on Prime?" "Yes," said, "in the lower district. Our mother works at a processing facility there." "And what were you three doing at the spaceport today?" Spoke up proudly. "We sell scrap metal. We find it near the old factories and sell it to the recyclers. We made 11 credits today." Raised her eyebrows. "That is good work. Your mother must be proud of you." "She is," said quietly. He was still nervous around the human, but he was starting to relax a little. They walked the rest of the way to the hotel, making simple conversation. Asked about their lives, and the boys told her about their home and their neighborhood and their mother. Noticed that paid close attention to everything they said. She asked follow-up questions. She seemed genuinely interested in them. When they reached the hotel, it was the nicest building had ever seen up close. The walls were made of polished white stone, and the doors were real glass. A doorman in a fancy uniform opened the door for them. Stopped outside and turned to face the three brothers. "Thank you so much for your help," she said. "You have no idea how much I appreciate it." "You are welcome," said. He set down her cases carefully. Looked at them thoughtfully for a moment. Then she asked a question that would change everything. "Would your mother mind if I came to thank you properly? I would like to meet the woman who raised such kind and helpful sons." The lower district of Prime was not a beautiful place. The buildings were old and crowded together. The streets were narrow and often dirty. The air always carried a faint smell of chemicals from the nearby factories. Most of the people who lived here worked long hours for little money. They were the ones who kept the trade hub running, but they rarely shared in its wealth. Had lived in the lower district for her entire life. She had married here. She had raised her three sons here. And 2 years ago, she had buried her husband here after a mining accident took him from her. Now she worked double shifts at a processing facility, cleaning floors and machines so that her boys could have food and a roof over their heads. She was preparing a simple dinner of grain soup when she heard voices outside her door. She recognized her sons immediately, was saying something about helping someone, was laughing nervously, and was chattering excitedly about a hotel made of white stone. Then heard a voice she did not recognize. It was a female voice speaking the common galactic language, but with a strange accent. An accent she had only heard a few times before in her life. A human accent. Went very still. Her hands stopped moving over the pot of soup. Her hearts, both of them, began to beat faster. Why would her sons be talking to a human? What had happened? The door opened and her three boys came rushing in. Their faces were bright with excitement. Behind them, standing in the doorway, was a human woman. Felt fear rise up in her chest. Humans were dangerous, everyone knew that. They were predators from a death world. They had strength and endurance that no could match. They ate meat. They fought wars for sport. They were not to be trusted. But this human woman did not look dangerous. She stood politely in the doorway, not entering without permission. Her expression was warm and friendly. She carried herself with quiet confidence, but there was no threat in her posture. Mother said quickly, "This is. We helped her carry her bags at the spaceport, and she wanted to come thank you." Looked from her son to the human and back again. She did not know what to say. Her home was small and shabby. The furniture was old. The walls needed repair. She felt ashamed to have this wealthy-looking human see how they lived. Seemed to sense her discomfort. She bowed her head slightly in a gesture of respect. "I apologize for arriving without warning," she said gently. "Your sons were so kind to help me today. I wanted to meet you and thank you for raising such wonderful boys, but I can leave if this is not a good time." "No," said quickly. She was not sure why she said it. Perhaps it was the genuine warmth in the human's voice. Perhaps it was the proud smiles on her sons' faces, or perhaps it was simply that had been taught to show hospitality to guests, no matter how unexpected. "Please come in. I was just making dinner. It is not much, but you are welcome to share it." Smiled and stepped inside. The boys closed the door behind her. The small room suddenly felt even smaller with 5 people in it, but did not seem to notice or care. She looked around at their modest home with kind eyes that held no judgment. "You have a lovely home," said. Almost laughed. "It is small and old," she said honestly. "It is filled with love," replied. "I can see that." She turned to the 3 boys. "Now, will you tell your mother what happened today?" The boys all started talking at once. They told about finding the human woman at the spaceport, about how the cargo lift was broken and no one would help her. They described carrying her heavy cases through the crowded marketplace and walking with her to the fancy hotel. Proudly announced that the hotel was made of white stone and had glass doors. Listened to all of it with growing amazement. Her sons had helped a human, a species that everyone feared. They had done it simply because she needed help, and they had asked for nothing in return. She felt tears forming in her eyes. She blinked them away quickly. "You have raised them well," said softly. She was watching with a thoughtful expression. "Most people at that spaceport walked right past me. Many of them looked at me with fear or disgust. But your sons saw a person who needed help and they helped. That is rare. That is precious." Did not know how to respond. She simply nodded and went back to preparing the soup. She added more water to stretch it further and found a few extra vegetables to add. It would not be much of a meal, but it would be enough. They ate together at the small table, asked questions about their lives, and slowly found herself opening up to this strange human woman. She talked about her husband and how he had died. She talked about working double shifts at the factory. She talked about how her sons collected scrap metal to help earn money for the family. Listened to everything with deep attention. She nodded at the right moments. She made small sounds of sympathy and understanding. She did not offer empty words of comfort or pity. She simply listened. When the meal was finished, leaned back in her chair and looked at the family with serious eyes. "I would like to take you all out for a proper meal tomorrow night," she said, "as thanks for everything you have done for me today." Shook her head. "That is not necessary." The boys were happy to help. "I know," said. "That is exactly why I want to do it. Please, it would honor me to repay your kindness." The boys looked at their mother with hopeful eyes, saw how much they wanted to accept. She thought about saying no. She thought about all the reasons why she should not accept gifts from a stranger, especially a human stranger. But then she looked at its warm smile and her sons' eager faces. "All right," said finally, "we accept." Smile grew wider. "Wonderful. I will send a transport to pick you up tomorrow at sunset." The next evening, they went to a restaurant that had only ever seen from the outside. The food was delicious. The service was perfect, and treated them all with warmth and respect. As they ate, asked a question. "If you could have anything for your sons," she said, "what would it be?" Thought about it carefully. "I wish they could go to the technical academy," she said finally. "It would give them real futures, but the fees are impossible for someone like me." Nodded slowly. She did not say anything else about it that night, but saw something change in her eyes, something that looked like determination. The morning sun was just beginning to rise over the lower district when heard a knock at her door. She had been awake for an hour already, getting ready for her shift at the processing facility. The boys were still sleeping in their small shared room. She opened the door and found standing there with several bags in her arms. The human woman was smiling warmly. "Good morning," said. "I brought breakfast." Stared at her in confusion. It was barely dawn. What was this wealthy human doing in the lower district at such an early hour, and why was she bringing them food? "I hope I am not intruding," continued. "I wanted to talk with you before you left for work. May I come in?" Stepped aside and let her enter. She watched as set the bags down on the small table and began unpacking them. There were fresh fruits and warm bread and a container of something that smelled like spiced meat. It was more food than usually bought in a whole week. "This is too much," said. Her voice was tight with discomfort. "We cannot accept all of this." Turned to look at her. Her expression was gentle but firm. "Among my people," she said, "when someone does you a kindness, you look for ways to return it. Not equally, but generously. We call it paying it forward. Your sons helped me when no one else would. This is me trying to pay that forward." Shook her head slowly. She did not understand this human way of thinking. Where she came from, you did not accept gifts from strangers. It created obligations. It made you vulnerable. The boys woke up to the smell of food and came rushing out of their room. Their eyes went wide when they saw the feast spread out on the table. They looked at their mother with questions in their eyes, and she nodded reluctantly. They fell upon the food with eager hands. Sat down at the table with them. She watched the boys eat with a satisfied smile on her face. Then she turned her attention to who was still standing near the door. "Please sit," said. "There is something I want to discuss with you." Sat down slowly. She took a piece of bread but did not eat it. She was too nervous to eat. "I run a company," said. "A logistics company. We move goods and materials between star systems. We operate in 12 different sectors and we are always growing." Nodded. She had guessed that was some kind of businesswoman. The expensive clothes and the heavy sample cases had made that clear. "I am looking for reliable people to work with in this sector," continued. "People who are honest and people I can trust." She paused and looked directly at. "I would like to offer you a job," she said, "as a regional coordinator for our operations here on Prime." Felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. She stared at with wide eyes. A job, a real job, not cleaning floors and machines. It did not make any sense. "I do not have any qualifications for that kind of work," said. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. "I clean factories. I did not even finish my education." Shook her head. "I saw all the qualifications I need yesterday," she said. "You raised 3 sons who would help a stranger without expecting anything in return. You taught them to be kind and brave and generous. That kind of character cannot be taught in any academy. It comes from the heart. And that is exactly what I need in my organization." Could not speak. Her throat had closed up with emotion. "The job pays well," continued, "and much of the work can be done from home, so you would have more time with your sons." She paused and smiled. "There is also something else." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. She placed it on the table in front of. "My company has a youth development program," said. "We sponsor promising young people to attend educational institutions. I would like to enroll your sons in this program. It would cover all their fees at the technical academy." Dropped his bread, made a small choking sound, looked at his mother with eyes that were suddenly full of tears. Stared at the folder like it might bite her. This was too much. This was far too much. People did not do things like this. Not for strangers, not for poor from the lower district. "Why?" asked. Her voice was shaking. "Why would you do this for us? You do not know us. You met us yesterday." Was quiet for a moment. She seemed to be thinking carefully about her answer. "When I was young," she said finally, "my family had nothing. My mother worked 3 jobs just to keep us fed. We lived in a tiny apartment in a bad part of a human city. I thought that was all my life would ever be." She paused and took a deep breath. "One day my mother helped a stranger, an alien merchant whose transport had broken down. She gave him food and let him use our communication device to call for help. He was and most humans at that time did not trust. Some people called my mother a traitor for helping him. They said she was foolish to trust an alien." Looked at with shining eyes. "But that merchant remembered her kindness," she said. "He came back a month later and offered my mother a job with his trading company. He paid for my education. He changed our entire lives. all because my mother helped him when no one else would. Felt tears running down her face. She did not try to stop them. Now I have the chance to do the same thing, said softly. Your sons helped me. They showed me kindness when everyone else walked past. How could I not try to repay that? How could I let this chain of kindness break? Looked at her sons, was trying to look brave, but his lip was trembling, was crying silently, had given up trying to hold back and was sobbing openly. She looked back at this human woman who had come into their lives like a storm and offered to change everything. I do not know what to say, whispered. Say yes, replied simply. Say yes and let me help you the way someone once helped me. Closed her eyes. She thought about her husband, who had always believed that good things could happen to good people. She thought about her sons, who had helped a stranger simply because it was the right thing to do. She thought about all the years of struggle and hardship and barely getting by. Then she opened her eyes and looked at. Yes, she said, her voice was stronger now. Yes, I accept. Smiled, and it was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. The boys cheered and rushed to hug their mother. The small room was suddenly full of joy and laughter and hope. And somewhere in the galaxy, a chain of kindness grew one link longer. 3 weeks had passed since accepted's offer. Everything had changed, and yet somehow everything felt strange and uncertain. No longer worked at the processing facility. She had a proper office now, a small room in a building near the Commerce District. She had a computer terminal and a communication device and a title, Regional Coordinator. Every time she saw those words next to her name, she had to stop and remind herself that this was real. The boys had started their preparation courses for the Technical Academy. Every morning, they put on their new uniforms and took the transport to the education center. They came home in the evenings with stories about their teachers and their classmates and all the amazing things they were learning. Was fascinated by engineering, loved computer systems, had discovered a talent for mathematics. The family had more money now than they had ever had before. They could afford good food. They could afford new clothes. They could afford to fix the broken heating unit in their home that had been failing for 2 years. But not everyone was happy about their sudden change in fortune. First noticed the whispers when she went to the market. Old neighbors who used to greet her warmly now looked at her with suspicious eyes. They would stop talking when she approached and start again when she walked away. She caught fragments of their conversations. Words like human and shame and what did she have to do echoed in her ears. The boys reported similar problems at the education center. Some of the other students treated them coldly. They asked pointed questions about how a cleaning woman from the lower district could suddenly afford technical academy fees. They made cruel jokes about the family's connection to a human. One evening, as was walking home from her office, an older male stepped into her path. She recognized him immediately. Counselor was one of the community elders, a respected figure who had lived in the lower district for over 60 years. He had known's husband. He had spoken at the memorial service after the mining accident. Now he looked at with cold disapproval in his dark eyes. I need to speak with you, Counselor said. His voice was sharp, about this human business. Felt her heart sink. She had been expecting this. Of course, she had been expecting this. She nodded and followed him to a small public square where several others had gathered. She realized with growing dread that this was not a private conversation. This was a public confrontation. Counselor turned to face her, and he did not bother to lower his voice. You have brought shame upon this community, he said loudly, taking gifts from a human, accepting their money, sending your sons to their schools. Do you not understand what humans are? Forced herself to stand straight. She would not cower. She would not apologize. Has been nothing but kind to my family, she said. She has asked for nothing in return. Nothing yet, Counselor replied. Humans are manipulative predators. They use other species for their own purposes. They pretend to be generous and then they strike when you are vulnerable. This is what they do. shook her head. That is not true, not all humans are the same, is a good person. You are naive, Counselor said. His voice was almost pitying now. Or perhaps you are something worse. Perhaps you have sold yourself to this human for money and comfort. A gasp went through the crowd, felt her face flush with anger and shame. She opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, her sons pushed through the crowd. Stepped forward, his young face burning with fury. How dare you, he said to Counselor. His voice was steady despite his anger. How dare you speak to our mother that way? She has done nothing wrong. She has only tried to give us a better life. Moved to stand beside his brother. Is our friend, he said. She helped us because we helped her. That is all. There is nothing shameful about kindness. Little grabbed his mother's hand and glared at the Counselor. You are a mean old man, he declared. My mother is good, is good. You are the one who should be ashamed. Counselor looked startled. He had not expected the children to defend their mother so fiercely. The crowd murmured uncertainly. Some of them seemed to be reconsidering their judgment. But the damage was done, could see it in the eyes of her neighbors, the doubt, the suspicion, the willingness to believe the worst about her. She gathered her sons and walked home without another word. That night, after the boys had gone to sleep, sat alone in the small kitchen. She stared at the wall and wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Maybe she should quit the job. Maybe she should return Olive's gifts and go back to cleaning floors. At least then the whispers would stop. At least then she could hold her head up in her own community. Her communication device buzzed. She looked at it and saw that she had received a message from. Hesitated, then she answered the call. His face appeared on the screen. She looked tired, like she had been working long hours, but her eyes were warm and concerned. I heard what happened, said gently. One of my employees told me about the confrontation in the square. I am so sorry. I never meant to cause trouble for you. Felt tears forming in her eyes. It is not your fault, she said. You have only tried to help us. Was quiet for a moment. Then she spoke again, her voice soft and thoughtful. When I was young, she said, my mother faced the same thing. When she accepted help from the merchant, some humans called her a traitor. They said she was foolish to trust an alien. They whispered behind her back and treated her like she had done something shameful. What did she do? Asked. She kept going, said simply. She knew that what she was doing was right. She knew that kindness is not something to be ashamed of, and eventually the whispers faded. The people who had judged her came to see that they were wrong. Leaned closer to the screen. I am not going to pressure you to stay, she said. This is your choice. If you want to quit, I will understand. But I want you to know something. Kindness will always have critics. There will always be people who cannot understand why someone would help a stranger without expecting something in return. They will make up dark explanations because they cannot imagine any other reason. She paused. But kindness also has a way of spreading, continued. It grows and multiplies. It changes hearts. It breaks down walls. Your sons saw that when they helped me at the spaceport. They are seeing it now as they defend you against unfair accusations. And someday, the people who are whispering about you will see it too. Wiped her eyes. She thought about her sons and how brave they had been. She thought about all the good things that had happened since she said yes to this offer. She thought about the chain of kindness that had described, stretching back through generations and forward into the future. The choice is yours, said again. But whatever you decide, I want you to know that I am grateful for you and your family. You have reminded me why I do what I do. Took a deep breath. She looked at this human woman who had given her family so much and asked for nothing in return. I will stay, said. Her voice was firm now, strong with new resolve. I will not let small minds drive me away from a good thing. Smiled, and it was like seeing the stars come out on a clear night. Good, she said. I was hoping you would say that. 1 year had passed since 3 young boys helped a tired human carry her bags at a spaceport. 1 year since a simple act of kindness had changed everything. Stood in front of a mirror in her new home and adjusted the collar of her formal dress. The fabric was soft and expensive, a deep blue color that matched the natural shade of her skin. She barely recognized the woman looking back at her. That woman looked confident and successful. That woman looked like someone who belonged at fancy events. It still felt strange sometimes. The new home with its proper heating and separate rooms. The job that challenged her mind and paid her well. The respect she had earned from her colleagues and even some of her old neighbors. So much had changed. But some things had stayed the same. Her son still made her proud every single day. Mother called from the other room. The transport is here. We need to go. Took one last look at herself in the mirror. Then she went to join her family. The Prime Annual Commerce Celebration was held in the grandest hall on the planet. Crystal lights hung from high ceilings. Tables were covered in white cloth and laden with food from 100 different worlds. Important people from every major species mingled and talked and conducted business. It was the most prestigious event of the year. Walked through the crowd with her sons beside her. Was 15 now, tall and confident in his academy uniform. He had been selected for an advanced engineering track after showing exceptional skill with mechanical systems. His teachers said he had the kind of mind that could design starships someday. Was 13 and growing into his own strength. He had found his passion in computer systems and data management. He spent hours studying code and networks, and he had already created several programs that his teachers called impressive. Was 11 and still the smallest of the brothers, but his mind was sharper than ever. His mathematics abilities had earned him a place in a special program for gifted students. He could solve problems that made adult scholars scratch their heads in confusion. They were good boys. They had always been good boys, but now they had the chance to become great men. The family made their way to the front of the hall, where a stage had been set up for speeches and awards. They found their seats in a reserved section near the stage. Noticed Counselor sitting a few rows behind them. The old looked uncomfortable, and he avoided meeting her eyes. A lot had changed with Counselor too. He had stopped his public criticism of after seeing how well she performed in her job and how her sons excelled in their studies. He had not apologized yet, but had heard through others that he was reconsidering his views on humans. That was something, at least. The ceremony began with speeches from various business leaders and politicians. Then the announcer called out the name that made hearts swell with pride. Winner of this year's Cross-Species Business Leadership Award. Walked onto the stage to loud applause. She looked elegant in her formal human clothing, her brown hair streaked with a little more than it had been a year ago. She smiled at the crowd and waited for the clapping to die down. "Thank you," said. Her voice carried clearly through the hall. "I am deeply honored to receive this award, but before I accept it, I want to tell you a story." The audience went quiet. 1 year ago, continued, I arrived at the spaceport here on Prime. I was tired from a long journey and a cargo lift had broken down, leaving me stranded with too many bags to carry. Hundreds of people walked past me. None of them stopped to help. She paused and looked out at the crowd. Then 3 young boys approached me, she said. They saw a stranger in need and they offered to help. They carried my heavy cases all the way to my hotel and they refused to accept any payment. They did it simply because it was the right thing to do. Felt tears forming in her eyes. She saw that her sons were listening intently, their faces glowing with emotion. "Those 3 boys taught me something important that day," said. "They reminded me that kindness does not know species or borders or social class. They showed me that good hearts exist everywhere, even in places where fear and prejudice tell us to expect the worst." She smiled and gestured toward the front of the audience. "I would like to invite those 3 boys and their mother to join me on stage," she said. "And please come up here." The crowd turned to look at them, felt her legs shaking as she stood. Her sons rose with her, and together they walked to the stage, embraced each of them in turn, and the audience applauded warmly. Stood in front of hundreds of important people from across the galaxy. She had never spoken to such a crowd before, but gave her an encouraging nod, and somehow she found her voice. 1 year ago said, I was afraid of humans. I believed all the stories about how dangerous and unpredictable they were. When my sons brought to our home, I did not know what to expect. She took a deep breath, but showed me that those stories were wrong, continued. She showed me kindness that I had never experienced from anyone outside my own family. She changed our lives not because she wanted something from us, but because someone had once changed her life in the same way. She called it paying it forward. I call it being truly good. Put her hand on shoulder and addressed the crowd again. Today I am announcing the creation of a new scholarship fund, said. It will be called the Three Brothers Fund, named after, and it will help families like theirs access education and opportunities that they could not otherwise afford. Because kindness should not be a rare thing. It should spread and grow until it touches every corner of our galaxy. The applause was thunderous. People stood from their seats, saw faces in the crowd that looked moved, inspired, changed by what they had heard. After the ceremony, Counselor approached them. He moved slowly, like every step cost him effort. He stopped in front of and stood in silence for a long moment. Then he bowed his head. I was wrong, he said quietly, wrong about you, wrong about the human. I judged you without knowing the truth and I caused you pain. I am sorry. Looked at the old who had once called her shameful in front of her neighbors. She saw genuine regret in his eyes. She saw a man who had learned a difficult lesson about prejudice and kindness. I forgive you, she said simply. Counselor nodded and walked away. Watched him go with a heart that felt lighter than it had in a long time. Later that evening, the family stood outside the grand hall. The celebration was winding down, and people were beginning to leave. Felt exhausted but happy, the kind of tired that comes from a very good day. Nudged his brothers and pointed across the plaza. A young alien girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old, was struggling with a stack of heavy packages. She was trying to carry them all at once, but they kept slipping from her thin arms. People walked past her without stopping, too busy with their own concerns to notice. The three brothers looked at each other. They did not need to speak. They knew exactly what to do. They walked across the plaza together and approached the young girl. Do you need help with those? Asked kindly. The girl looked up at them with surprised eyes. Then she smiled with relief. Yes, please, she said. Thank you so much. The brothers picked up her packages and began walking with her, asking her name and where she was going. Watched from the doorway of the grand hall. Came to stand beside her, and together they watched the three boys help a stranger carry her burden. They are good boys, said softly. They are, agreed, and they learned from the best. Smiled, so did I, she said, so did I. The boys disappeared around a corner with the young girl, their laughter echoing through the evening air. Somewhere in the galaxy, a chain of kindness grew one link longer. And so it would continue from one heart to another, from one stranger to the next, forever and ever without end.